Welcome back to another video, everyone. Today we're just going to be doing a couple of rehouses and showcasing two new spiders that have turned up in the collection, which are really cool. So we won't waste any time, we'll get straight into it. So we've got 5 up for rehouse today. But first of all, just ignore the mislabeled that I need to scrub that off still, is the Cephagus species Wumba that we featured in the first of the collection tour videos. Second, we have Stanwelia CF Inornata, which is one I've recently acquired. The third one we'll have is Arbonitis species Glenmond. The fourth one is an unknown Cataxia species, a very big one. And finally, a female Eupolis regalis. Now, the thing that's quite special about all of these ones, apart from the first one today, is that all of these are part of breeding pairs. So each of these ones I have males for, and that's the reason we're trying to get these set up as soon as possible so that we can breed them comfortably. Now these two I did have in other temporary setups, but I figured for the best success with pairing, it's probably best to house them in natural setups. That's why I've actually given these to clay, like what they would normally live in, and therefore moss, because it grows better in clay. So let's get straight. So first up we have the Cephagus species Wumba, and you can see it's not really the biggest I've got right now. It's pretty small for a curtain web. However, when they grow larger, they are one of the biggest curtain webs we have in Australia. So this is the setup I've actually given this one today. So this one uses my standard peat moss based mix. So that is mostly peat moss that's the base product, and then it has a fair amount of red reptile sand mixed in. Although the red stuff you see on the top is actually just sprinkled on after I mix it all together, and a little bit of white coarse propagation sand from Bunnings. So you mix all that together, you compact it down nice and firm, and you end up with a mixture that's natural. It's not made of cocoa fiber, which a lot of species don't really like the feel of. It's fairly natural, it holds its shape and moisture pretty well. And it's easy to burrow into, especially for these curtain webs, because they do like to dig, but they don't really as strong as some of the other ones. So we have her starter burrow there underneath a wooden hide, and we've got some web anchor points here, so I'm hoping that she'll fill pretty much all this with dense white silk. So we'll get straight into it. I'm going to put her right there and hope that she will just go straight down into the enclosure without running around too much. I do have a catch cup on hand just in case she makes a bit of a bolt. As you can see, they're very touchy and flighty. And of course, as soon as she's in, she starts running. So yeah, when they're in their sort of younger or smaller sizes, they're a little bit more pale, but as they grow, they kind of fade, or not really fade, but they get a stronger sort of black coloration, and they look nearly identical to Australopithecine ambuca. Pretty much the only difference between the two is the males of these ones lack any leg spurs, whereas the males of an ambuca do actually have them. So she seems to be reasonably well settled in. I don't want to make this video as long as the others, so we'll finish up here and move on to the next one. Next on the list is Stanwelia CF Inornata. So this is one that I got myself not very long ago, maybe a week or so ago. And this is something I should probably address to any concerned viewers. So all these mites here are often, when a lot of people see spiders on mites, they immediately panic and think, oh no, they're parasitic, what am I going to do? These mites, though, are not that case. So with nearly every single mite you'll find on a spider, they're actually what you would just call hitchhiker mites. So that means that they'll stick themselves to the host. So in this case, they're sort of sticking around the joints. You can see they're under the legs. They look very unsightly. They're not a pleasant sight to see, but they don't harm the spider. So what they do is when the spider eats, they'll actually go up toward the fangs and they'll clean off the leftover food remains in the spider. So in a way, they're actually helping the thing out, although they do look rather unsightly. And when every time that she molts, she'll actually lose quite a lot of them. She'll shed them off, and only a couple will remain. So let's get straight into it. This is the setup I've got. It's the exact same mixture as the previous one, so it's the peat and sand based mixture. And here we go. Now these guys can be very fast and sometimes defensive, so I'm just trying to go nice and slow, not trying to... Yep, there we go, the defensive straight away. And actually this is a perfect opportunity to show something when she's actually a little bit more flipped upside down. Oh, she even went for the tongs just there. So if you can carefully see there's actually red coloration underneath, so around where her fangs are underneath her. Now, I've had a lot of people tell me that this means that if you see a spider with that red patch underneath, that's a guarantee that it's a funnel web, because only funnel webs have those red patches under the fangs. But that is not the case. Many primitive spiders, which is what these are, will have that red coloration. So there we go. She's coming out on her own accord now. Might have to be a little bit careful she doesn't run out. So I've also just put some simple, this is just dried gum leaves as decoration. So I've had these in a little container for a couple of months now. There's a small tree that the council planted that actually fell down. So I just took the opportunity to take some leaves of it. So they've been nice and dried out in the sun and in a sealed container. So they don't have any, it's not like moist and won't carry any fungus. And I've used these quite a bit. And we've got someone who's a little bit of a keen escapee. So what's the best thing to do in this case? Simply block her off with a container. And there you go, because they cannot climb smooth surfaces. So once you get into a cup, that's fine. So this time I've put her lid over here just to make sure that the former escape does not happen again. And there we go. So she's back in, she'll find her starter bar before long, and we will close this off. So that was Stanwheelia inornata, or CF inornata. We'll move on to the next one. So here we have Arvanitis species Glenmond. So I was given 2 of these a little while back, and sure enough, one of them was a mature male and the other was a female. So this girl has recently molted. So it's a little bit tricky to see. It just looks like glare on the video, but the inside of her legs are quite sort of grey, sort of dark grey. That's actually her non-solidified carapace. So she molted a little, like maybe a week or so ago. Arvanitis do take quite a while to harden up after a molt. But in this stage, she is still strong enough to dig. But we're not going to feed her for a while because her fangs will still be pink underneath those chelicerae because they have not hardened up properly. So without further ado, we will put her in, and we will try and just very, very gently coax her off this thing with a metal skewer. You don't want to be too forceful, especially with a freshly, or not freshly, but reasonably recently molted spider. So just very carefully, just gentle tapping. And perfect, straight into the starter bar. Not the most exciting footage, but it is a relief for me when they can find it straight away, because it means that they are pretty soon to then start settling in. Now she's got that really cool little sort of stripe going across the back of the abdomen. I thought it was a scar at first, but no, it is indeed just a pattern, just a funny little light patch. We'll see, well, with all of these we will, I guess we'll see more of her in another video when she's actually webbed up and made a little burrow. Alright, we'll move on to the next 2 because these are going to be the most interesting ones of today's video. Now you might be wondering what the mess of moss on the carpet is here, and that's because I just took the liberty of removing all the moss from the following spider, which is a Cataxia species. Because it's very hard to really manage these spiders with one hand, and this is the reason why. So here's actually, while she's threat posing me in the lid, here's a better example of those red hairs around the fangs. So that there is the fangs. So the chelicerae are just above the fangs, so just beneath the eyes. That's what's glowing now, like little headlamps. Headlights have fangs, and yeah, they've got that red patch of warning defensive hair. Now, Cataxia are not a deadly species, so apart from those very, very painful fangs themselves, the venom is reasonably mild and not actually as dangerous as what many people would think looking at a very large black spider. I mean, you can see just how huge these spiders can get, and I do have one that's just a little bit bigger than this. So they are very, very defensive. They will often, be quite annoying to manage during a rehousing. I would normally do this just by hand, but when she's like this, overlapping the lid, I will do this by tongs just to play it safe, although it looks like the container is sort of sliding out, which is probably not really the best thing. Maybe if I grab the lid. So yeah, their fangs don't really, their chelicerae, I should say, don't really protrude very far forward in comparison with some other idiopods, like, well, not other idiopods, but other sort of primitive spiders like wishbone spiders, so Anomie, those kind of ones. They will have very far protruding chelicerae, but these guys, it's sort of very short. And that. Anyway, let's get her into the container. Hopefully she'll find the starter burrow pretty quick and just get out of the cup. That would make my job quite a bit easier. There we go. Now that she's actually behaving, or reasonably behaving, we can get a little bit of a closer look. So the one I demonstrated in, or showed off in the first of the collection tour videos was a lot smaller than this. This one's a very, very attractive specimen. It's got like red joints around sort of a jet black body, so it's quite an interesting colour scheme. Overall, though, they're not really. This one doesn't really have any patterns. It's not really like a very ornately marked spider. If you look very carefully, you can see there are faint stripes on the abdomen. But yeah, in general, they're a very plain spider, but they make very cool lids, so with moss. So that's why I've given her a decent patch of this stuff right here and some sphagnum moss. So hopefully she'll find that burrow. This container may look a little bit small for something her size, but trust me, they do very well in these. Especially when they start wrapping around, they can make a burrow that's easily as long or even longer than what they would do in the wild. And I've never had issues with them getting dissatisfied with these containers where they'll start coming out and wandering. So these setups do work pretty well, as long as you give them the right substrate, which is something that we'll definitely need to cover in a couple of videos. Okay, now I have opened up the package. That was a little bit of extra wrapping. I definitely did two hands for that, so I didn't show that on camera. But what we have right here, you can already see one little one right there, is two of a very new species to the hobby. And one interesting thing you can notice already, if you're familiar with primitive spiders at all, you'll know that they cannot climb glass. Apart from a very small, or two sort of groups, there's tarantulas or Theraphossidae, and then another group, Barychellidae. So what we've got right here is a little tiny spider that can climb smooth surfaces or not fall off, which it did just then, which means this is a Barychellid or a brush-footed trapdoor. So welcome to the collection, the tiny little Sasson Colemanni. So these are a dwarf brush-footed trapdoor, and they're also arboreal as well. They are absolutely tiny. This is an adult female, believe it or not. So in terms of behavior, these guys are basically our equivalent of what we would call, Typhoclena celadonia overseas. So they live arboreally. They'll make a little tiny sort of depression in the wood. I think they'll find like a little bump, like a dent sort of in the wood, and then they'll cover it over with debris and make a sort of trapdoor of sorts. So they're very, very small, so they don't need too big housing, but we do want to try and give these guys the best home possible. So we're not going to house them in this video now, but we will house them pretty soon. I'll get some nice sort of soft wood with some moss on it, and then we'll be able to make sort of a naturalistic little setup for both of them. So this is the first one, and I might have to put my camera down to have a look at the second one. So I did a little bit of digging into the moss, and sure enough I found the second one. It looks a little bit smaller, I think, than the other one. Not much smaller, but just a little bit. And they're a very, very attractive little spider. For something that's so small, they've got these amazing little stripy patterns all over them. There's only one other dwarf species I have. That's a dwarf Stanwheelia, and it also is like this. It's even though it's tiny, it's got incredible patterns all over its stripy legs and everything. And I guess they're probably just too small to really be able to have it visible. But yeah, unlike their larger cousin in the Baryshelidae family, the genus Idiomata, these guys do not have the iridescent leg hair that is underneath them. And actually, since the last video I made with where I mentioned my electric blue brushfoot, it actually did come outside at night. So I will include a few photos at the end of this video, just so you guys can see the electric blue hairs that I was mentioning in that video. So that's the second one. The first one is hiding, I think, just under here somewhere. Actually, no, never mind. It's climbed all the way up there. So they're very good at climbing pretty much anywhere. You've got to be very careful that they don't get lost in little gaps like this. So I have to be very careful that this one doesn't get squashed or something in that clip. Yeah, absolutely tiny little spiders, but I think they're very, very cool. And I'm very excited to finally be able to actually have some. So when my macro lens arrives, I'll get a lot more detailed close up instead of this sort of blurry footage. Alright, we'll go back to rehousing and we'll finish up this video. Now for another exceptionally angry species, we've got Eupolis regalis. So I'm pretty sure this is actually a quite newly named species. Normally, when we find new spiders, they'll sit in the museum for ages and they don't get named for quite a while. So it's always cool when a new one does come out. This is a very, very attractive spider, even for Eupolis. It's got very rich red all over it. Now, unfortunately, the rim of the container is kind of obscuring that, but you can see from the side. Now, even the Chelicerae, they're very red. This spider is really, really nice looking. And quite large as well. So you can see from the side there, I think, yeah, this one's a little bit bigger or similar size to the Eupolis, what would that one have been? Grandis that we featured in the collection tour video. She's about the same size. So her body length is roughly the length of my pinky finger, just a bit shorter. And these are the only spiders that can kind of rival Cataxia for aggression. Look, this one is still threat posing upside down, but at least she's found the starter burrow. So this one, I don't really want to get all this debris out. That would kind of be annoying. That's a bit of a better sense of scale of how big she is. So she's one of the bigger Eupolis I do have. And of course, as soon as I took some of the moss out, yeah, she just starts threat posing. So I'm going to use the skewer again. I would actually recommend that this be done with something that is not metal. This is really not ideal because if they do try and bite it defensively, they can damage their fangs. So like a paintbrush, like a wooden skewer, just anything that's softer than metal would normally be better for the job. I just don't have anything like that with me right now. Let's have a look. There we go. So even I jumped there a little bit. They reacted very quickly. So as you can see, it took a good couple of seconds of me sort of poking her around. I wasn't doing it too hard, but they'll sort of stand their ground and then all of a sudden just launch into defensive posture. And there we go. Now you can see just how red she is. And while she's like that, we'll put her side by side. So yeah, she's a very large spider, and this is by far definitely not the largest Eupolis I've seen. I think I might have mentioned it in another video, but I do actually have one on my shelf that needs rehousing soon, and it is the biggest trapdoor spider I have ever seen. It's got I think a bang on 10 centimeter leg span. So this one is nothing compared to that one. However, it's still a very impressive spider, and it will make a really cool lid. So one other thing which is important when housing trapdoors, especially from Eupolis and Cataxia, you'll notice how with these ones I've got the starter burrow going down, whereas with these ones it goes across. And that's something that not a lot of people realize. And yeah, that is that many like heavily built trapdoors like Eupolis, they really prefer to dig horizontally into a vertical slope. So it's not quite vertical, but as you can see, it is still pretty. It is on a pretty low angle. It's not a very steep thing, so they'll go straight and then they'll go down. They'll hinge their lid from the top. Same goes for the cataxia, except they'll do it out of moss instead of clay. So she will compact a bunch of that clay down into a really smooth lid. And then I'm not sure if this one does, but I put this moss here just in case. But yes, they'll often sort of mesh some moss in together with the lid. So it's a really interesting looking feature when it's actually complete and growing. And all this moss as well will eventually grow out. I have tested it on this clay before and it grows very well. So I've just got a little tiny patch from my cultures which are running a little bit low at the moment. So in a couple of months' time, this enclosure will be nice and green and not just the yucky brown clay that we've seen. So I hope you enjoyed this video. That's all we've really got for today. We'll do some more rehousing in the coming weeks. We've got plenty more to do, including some very unique specimens that are almost unseen by the hobby. So if you like this video, feel free to subscribe, like it, and you leave a comment. We'd really love to have you on board with the channel. And we'll see you around next time.